Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling something that can really kill a good speech. Monotony.
Yeah.
It's like the silent killer of public speaking. We're diving into a chapter called The Sin of Monotony,
Ooh.
and I think we're going to learn a lot about keeping our audience hooked.
I think you'll be surprised, actually. It's more than just like a boring voice, you know?
Okay, so beyond the monotone voice, what is monotony really? And is it really that big of a deal?
Well, the source digs into how the word monotonous has actually evolved.
Okay.
I mean, it used to just mean having one tone.
Yeah.
But now it's really about a lack of variation in like every part of how you deliver a speech.
So it's like if a speech were a song, it'd be stuck on repeat. No dynamics, no changes.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
The source even says, the monotonous speaker not only drones along in the same volume and pitch of tone, but uses always the same emphasis, the same speed, the same thought, or dispenses with thought altogether.
Woof. That's kind of brutal, but
Yeah.
I've definitely been in presentations that felt like that, or it's just painful.
Right, and that's why the source calls monotony a sin of omission. It's
Yep.
like leaving out all the good stuff, the color, the spice that really makes a speech exciting. Think about it.
Yeah.
When a speaker changes their pace, emphasizes a point, maybe pauses for effect,
Oh, yeah.
it keeps us on the edge of our seats.
Definitely keeps you engaged.
Yeah,
So monotonous speaker just skips all that.
they do. They totally miss that chance to
They do.
connect with the audience, to make their
Mhm.
message come alive. It's like, there's this quote from Emerson that the source mentions
Okay.
about art. And he says it's crucial to detach thoughts and phrases so they stand out. You create that contrast, to emphasize certain
Which
things.
monotony completely fails to do.
Right. And, it's not just boring. The source actually says that monotony can be harmful. They even compare it to, get this, solitary confinement.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty heavy comparison.
It is heavy. But think about it. Solitary confinement, it's supposed to be like the worst punishment, right?
Yeah.
Because it's totally depriving people of like stimulation, connection, and a monotonous presentation. It kind of does the same thing.
Oh, I see. Like trapping the audience in a box of boredom, no escape.
Exactly.
Okay, that's definitely not what we want as speakers. So how do we avoid that? How does the source say we can break free?
Well, they start with some pretty relatable examples of monotony, things we probably all encounter. Like, that neighbor who blasts the same 3 songs every
Oh,
weekend?
yeah, the ones at the limited playlist.
Yeah. Like, come on, man. There's a whole world of music out there.
Exactly.
And that's kind of the point the source is making. Monotony shows a lack of depth, of variety.
Okay.
Whether it's that limited music selection or a limited set of speaking skills, it can make you seem kind of limited.
Yeah, I get that. So for us as speakers, how does that translate to being engaging?
Well, the source uses this really cool analogy comparing monotony to poverty. They talk about the idle rich who have all these choices in life, all this variety. Then they contrast them with someone who's kind of stuck with limited options.
Right.
It's like exploring the world versus being stuck on the same bus route every day.
Okay, so the monotonous speaker is the one stuck on the bus, not showing the full picture.
Exactly. But when we embrace variety in how we speak, we show that we've got more to offer, a wider range of knowledge and thought. It's like we're saying, hey, I've got a lot to share, hop on board.
I love that. It's like variety lets us showcase our potential as speakers, going beyond just our voice to our ideas and that connection with the audience.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm with you. So to kind of wrap this part up, it sounds like variety's not just about avoiding a monotone voice. It's about bringing in a wider range of ideas, connecting with the audience on a deeper level.
Yeah. And this leads to another fascinating point the source brings up. The contrast between nature and monotony.
Oh, interesting. How does nature fit in with all of this?
Well, think about it. Nature is all about variety and change, right? You've got mountains, valleys, forests, deserts, even calm lakes and raging rivers. It's never static, never predictable.
That's so true. And on the flip side, man-made environments can be so uniform, so repetitive, like endless rows of identical houses or miles of just concrete.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The source even specifically calls out long rows of brownstone fronts and miles of paved streets as examples of monotony. They say when it comes to public speaking, we need to get back to nature in how we deliver our message.
So more like a wildflower meadow and less like a concrete parking lot.
Precisely. By embracing that same dynamism and variety that we see in the natural world, we make our speeches way more captivating.
This is really making a lot of sense. It also ties in with what the source said about how variety actually brings pleasure.
Right.
It's like our brains crave those changes, that stimulation.
Yeah, and when we deny our audience that stimulation, we lose them. Their attention, their interest, it's gone.
And I think the source had a great analogy for this, right? Something about a piano.
Oh yeah, the piano analogy. Imagine just hitting the same piano key over and over again. It wouldn't exactly be a beautiful melody.
More like torture.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the point is, if you're trying to teach, to influence an audience, you can't subject them to that. You got to engage them, and variety is key for that.
I'm with you. So it's not just about being not monotonous. It's about using variety to actually create an impact, right?
Mm.
The source also mentions Les Miserables as an example of how to present serious topics in a really engaging way. What's the takeaway there?
Well, it reminds us that even the most important truths can be conveyed in a memorable way, in a way that really sticks with people. I mean, Les Miserables is full of suffering redemption, but it gets to you, you know?
Uh-huh.
The music, the characters, the drama.
So it's about more than just avoiding monotony. It's about using variety to make a real impact, to really move people. And I think the source makes a great point about how we need the right tools to do that. They compare a speaker's tools to, like, a carpenter or an organist.
That's right. And just like those professions need a deep understanding of their tools, so do we as speakers. We've got to understand and apply the principles that make a speech truly impactful.
And those are the tools we'll be exploring more in this deep dive, right? The tools to break free from monotony and become more captivating speakers.
You got it.
I'm excited. But before we move on to the specific tools, the source also mentions something about the limitations of just relying on technique. They even bring up this analogy about an ox cart and an automobile.
It's a really clever way to show that even with the best tools, if you're stuck in old ways of doing things, you won't get very far. You need the right approach, the right vehicle for the job.
Okay, so no more horse and buggy speeches. We're upgrading to a modern approach.
Exactly. And that's what we'll be diving into in the next part of our deep dive. Uncovering the laws of effective speaking and how to apply them to create a speaking style that's both captivating and impactful.
That's what I like to hear. But before we jump into those specific tools, the source makes one more point that I think is super important to highlight.
And that is,
Even with all the fancy techniques, there's one crucial ingredient you can't fake.
yes. The source says, technique is useless without truth, force, feeling, and life.
Right. It's like trying to put lipstick on a pig. Or shoeing a dead horse, as the source so colorfully puts it.
Yeah. No amount of skill can replace that genuine passion, that connection.
So technique matters, but it's really the heart and soul of the message that makes it hit home.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, let's take a closer look at those laws of effective speaking and how they help us really bring our messages to life. We'll cover that in part 2 of this deep dive.
All right, I'm ready to unlock these laws of effective speaking. What can you tell me about them?
Well, think of them less like strict rules and more like guidelines, based on what really engaging speakers and actors naturally do.
So not some rigid formula, but principles we can adapt to our own style.
Exactly. And the source highlights a few key elements: vocal variety, pacing, emphasis, and pauses.
Okay, those sound familiar, but I'm guessing there's more to it than meets the eye. Let's start with vocal variety. What makes it so powerful?
It goes way beyond just changing your pitch. It's about using all the tools in your vocal toolbox.
Okay.
Pitch, volume, tone, even rhythm. You create a soundscape that's really engaging. Think of it like music. A flat monotone would be like playing the same note over and over again.
Right.
But when you vary the notes, the dynamics, the rhythm, you create something interesting, something beautiful.
So instead of a broken record, we want to be like a symphony orchestra.
Exactly. And it's not just about avoiding that monotone. It's about using your voice to make the message come alive. You can highlight key points, create emotional connections, make your ideas stick.
Okay, I like that. So vocal variety, like adding all the spice and flavor to our speech. What about pacing? How does that work?
Pacing is all about the speed and rhythm of your delivery. Like a good musician, they know when to speed up, slow down.
Yeah.
A good speaker uses pacing to build anticipation, emphasize points, and give the audience time to process.
So it's not just talking fast or slow. It's about being strategic with the pace to keep the audience engaged.
Precisely. And pauses are a big part of that.
Oh, yeah, the power of the pause.
A well-placed pause can create intimacy, let something sink in, or signal a transition to a new idea.
It's like those pauses in a movie, The ones that build suspense and make you wonder what's coming next.
Exactly. Pauses give the audience a moment to breathe, to absorb what you've just said.
Okay, so we've got vocal variety, pacing, and pauses.
Right.
What about emphasis? Where does that fit in?
Emphasis is all about highlighting the important stuff,
Right.
the words and phrases that really carry your message. It's like bolding text, but with your voice.
So like shining a spotlight on those key words, using our voice to guide the audience's attention.
Exactly. You can do that by changing your volume, your pitch, even your tone. You can even use pauses or changes in pace to really make certain words stand out.
It's really cool how these elements all work together to make things more dynamic, more engaging.
Yeah.
And I like how the source emphasizes that these are things good speakers and actors do naturally.
Yeah, that's key. We're not trying to force ourselves to be something we're not. It's about tapping into our own natural way of speaking and then just refining it, making it even better.
So not putting on an act, but just being our best, most authentic selves on stage.
Exactly. And that brings us to another point that the source really hits on: the importance of being genuine.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that before.
It doesn't matter how good your technique is if the audience doesn't feel that real connection.
Right, like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Exactly. I love how the source uses that analogy of the cultivated strawberry to explain this.
Oh, yeah, remind me about that one.
It's like, we can take a naturally delicious strawberry and make it even better through careful cultivation. We can refine our natural speaking style to make it more impactful.
So it's not about being fake, it's about taking what we already do well and making it even better.
Precisely. And with that in mind, let's move on to part 3, where we'll explore some practical tips, actually applying these principles and taking our speaking to that next level.
Okay, so we've talked about the theory, we've explored the tools. Now, how do we actually put this all into practice? How do we use those laws to conquer monotony and become those dynamic speakers we're aiming for?
Well, the source really reminds us that it's not about memorizing a script.
Right.
Right.
No robots allowed.
Exactly. It's about understanding the principles and making them our own.
Okay, so no robotal speaking. Got it. Where do we even begin? What are some actual steps we can take to, practice and get better?
The source is big on this idea of becoming your own best critic. Remember,
Yeah, I remember that.
practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, and they said if no one else will listen to us practice, we should listen to ourselves.
Right.
Which could be a little awkward.
It can be. But the point is we need to evaluate our own performance.
I get that. Okay, so how do we actually do that? Be our own critic.
Well, one of the simplest things is to record yourself speaking. I know it might be a little painful at first,
I can imagine.
but it's really eye-opening. Because when you listen back, you might hear things you didn't notice in the moment.
Oh, like all the ums and uhs that pop up when you're nervous.
Exactly. Or maybe your voice is flatter than you thought. Or you're rushing. Recording gives you that feedback you need those areas to improve.
So hit that record button and embrace our inner critic. What else can we do to put these laws into action?
It's key to remember there's no substitute for really understanding the principles, So like the difference between just blindly following a recipe and actually knowing why certain ingredients work.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Mastering the craft versus just going through the motions. But how do we get to that deeper understanding?
Remember how the source talked about these laws
Yeah.
being based on what good speakers and actors do naturally? One of the best ways to learn is to study the greats.
Oh, I like that. So watch those amazing TED Talks, listen to our favorite podcasts, even just watch those speakers we admire and figure out their secrets.
Exactly. Pay attention to how they use their voice, their pacing, the pauses, the emphasis. You start to see the patterns,
Like studying a master painter or a musician, seeing how they do what they do.
Totally. And as you're observing, experiment. Try incorporating those techniques into your own practice. See what feels natural and what works for you.
So record ourselves, study the masters, and experiment. Any other tips for fighting monotony and making our speeches stand out?
Well, this goes back to that idea of truth, force, feeling, and life from the source. We need to remember the power of that emotional connection. I mean, facts are important, but it's the passion, the genuineness that really grabs the audience.
Yeah, it's like you can have a perfectly structured speech, but if it doesn't come from the heart, it'll fall flat.
Exactly. It's like that cultivated strawberry analogy.
Right.
We're not just delivering information, we're sharing a bit of ourselves.
So it's about being ourselves up there, bringing our passion or unique perspective to the table.
Exactly. And when we do that, we invite the audience in.
Yeah.
And that's when the magic happens.
This has been a great deep dive. We went from monotony being just a boring voice to seeing how it can really impact a speech, how it's a missed opportunity to connect. But most importantly, we've got some actionable steps to actually make a change, become better speakers.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Uh,
And to everyone listening, remember that conquering monotony. It's not a one-time fix. It's a journey. It's about refining your craft, embracing who you are as a speaker, and making that real connection with your audience.
And remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The source we've been exploring has even more to offer, so keep digging deeper, keep practicing, and keep those speeches engaging.